And good morning. Uh, Welcome to Murder and Coffee, TPK Roleplay's GM talk show, where we discuss all things TTRPGs and game mastering. I am Dr. Tyrant, and I will be one of your co-hosts this morning. I'm joined by my other co-host, Luca Locke, as well as our very special guest, Zeke Gonzalez. For all of you DMs, aspiring writers, and intrepid adventurers out there, we will be accepting audience questions near the end of the stream. So while you all think about some things you'd like to ask, why don't we go around the table real quick and introduce ourselves, starting with Luca.
I'm Licklock. I'm Dungeon Master and Design Coordinator for TPK Roleplay. You can find me as Lukelock just everywhere. Zeke?
And Zeke.
And I'm Zeke Gonzalez. I am a graduate student and creator for the Dungeon Masters Guild. Up until lately, I've been focusing on D&D content for D&D 5e, and I'm on Twitter at Fantasy Ecology.
Awesome. And I am Dr. Tyrant, a GM, staff member, and host for TPK Roleplay. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter at Dr. Tyrant. So now that we have intros out of the way, how about we get the show on the road? Hey guys, how is everybody? How's your morning?
She empty.
She empty. No. Well, I was going to ask, is anybody drinking anything special coffee wise?
No, this is some bag of something delicious that I got at my local grocery store, and I couldn't tell you what it is. But it's good.
I'm drinking 30-cent a cup Amazon brand coffee, so
nice.
we live in that strapped grad student life over here.
Yeah, I used to, when I first started drinking coffee, would get like cool beans that were like chocolate flavored or whatever to like really just give me that nice punch in the morning. Mm-hmm. But since then, I've started going for the $7 barrel of Folgers. So that's the dark side of the moon that I currently live on.
We are all about money efficiency here.
We love a discount.
Yes.
Exactly. So yeah, first things first, the video that you all saw at the beginning of the stream is our brand new intro video to Murder and Coffee. I am personally like, I don't know if it's the coffee or it's the video, but I'm like jittering right now. I think it's a little bit of both.
Probably.
It's probably the coffee, to be completely honest. Yeah. So for everyone that doesn't know who our special guest here today is, Zeke, do you want to just give an introduction to yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I guess the things that I'm most well known for is I mostly create bestiaries of monsters that are inspired by science, which is sort of a loose way of saying that they're inspired by things we know that animals can actually do on Earth, or scientific phenomena, not necessarily scientific. I mean, everything that happens is real, right? So like right. Physical phenomenon or other just sort of like cool or interesting things that happen on our world. I try to like be like, what would be the fantasy equivalent of this? Mash that up and then give those abilities or use that inspiration to build monsters. Mm-hmm. And I also write adventures. And I guess there are a couple through lines to some of my adventures. Some of them are also sort of have that scientific impetus, like climate change as a driver for NPC motivations, or an ecosystem stability and stuff like that. But I think that's sort of like the main theme of what I do. And I think the two big projects that I have worked on in the last 2 or 3 years are the Scientific Secrets series, which is when I get together a big group of collaborators, and together I am where we all create monsters, and I produce these bestiaries that go alongside hardback campaigns from Wizards of the Coast. So for example, recently, because Icewind Dale Realm of the Frost Maiden came out, we created Scientific Secrets of Icewind Dale, which is a bunch of monsters that are inspired, like I said previously, by science, to put it like very broadly. And they are like tied into the lore of the adventure and the setting, so that gives GMs an assortment of really cool, unique new monsters to pull from to add to their campaign if they want to run that hardback. And the second thing that I completed this year that has been like a big long-term project of mine is the Pretty Little Liches series, which I know both of you are familiar with. And that is a tier 4, I guess, mini campaign, but I like to think that I give enough content that you can sort of pad it out into like a full campaign the way that I ran my playtest. Which is a tier 4 mini campaign centered around the destruction of an organization of liches. And each of the liches, I tried to get away from that sort of generic lich stat block in the monster manual and tried to give each one a unique personality, some unique traits. So we've got an Oni lich, a Medusa lich, and an Elitha lich, which is a mind flayer undead spellcaster. So trying to like really mix it up, put them in really unique settings, and just give GMs a lot of tools to create really fun, fantastical tier 4 games.
Right. And I'm enthralled with your content. To me,
thank you.
To me, there's a lot of people out there that like to say, I don't want, real life in my D&D and my TTRPGs. To me, the more that I can identify with in a story in general is going to make that story more real to me. So if, the local flora and fauna are, something that I can, see, identify from the real world, then it feels like I'm in that setting. And so the package that you're working on for Rime of the Frost Maiden, I really, really am excited for that. Specifically because I've been looking at Rime of the Frost Maiden for a long time, because it's, basically the only other full-length true horror campaign that I can think of, at least like official Wizards of the Coast material. I'm probably forgetting something, but
outside of Curse of Strahd, maybe, which is
yes,
gothic.
Yes, outside of Curse of Strahd, which is my favorite campaign of all time, and is probably Luca's as well. So Rime of the Frost Maiden, I'm very excited to dive into that. We have we actually have a Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign starting this week, this coming up week on TPK's channel. So it's going to be fun to watch. And we also have a Curse of Strahd campaign on the channel now, and possibly more coming up. We'll see. No one's supposed to know.
Saturday morning secrets.
Secrets. But no, also out of you're familiar with the Harper's Investigations campaign that Luca ran. So I joined basically halfway. I think exactly halfway. I think we ran 26 episodes. I'm pretty sure I joined in 13, something around there.
Yeah.
So out of those, 13 episodes that we ran, your Pretty Little Liches, because Luca ran them as one shots, obviously. Right. Those one shots were by far my favorite. Like it inspired the most RP, the most genuine interest in the setting that we delved into. The liches themselves were incredible. And Luca, was Targrith your creation, Luca, or was that Zeke's creation?
No, they were Zeke's, yeah.
Well,
okay.
I do have to give Luca a huge shout out, because running tier 4 content for so many tier 4 characters with so many abilities is enormously difficult, and the fact that you pulled it off while still tying it into your overarching campaign and still making it so fun and engaging for everyone was really a joy to watch. So you also have Luka to thank big time for the fun you had with there, for sure.
Absolutely. No, Targrith was a very fun character. It's not often that we don't kill the final boss. So, and then, Targrith showed up for the finale. Secrets. If you haven't watched the Harper's,
I haven't finished the finale yet.
Oh no. But yeah, no, he's a fan favorite. But yeah, no, I love your work. I'm excited to hear more about your creation process. Luka, do you have anything specifically about Pretty Little Liches or the scientific based content before we dive into like the idea behind how he creates it?
No, I mean, I know when we were talking about having you on the show, Zeke, Tyrant was like, okay, so what ones did he write for the Harper investigation stuff that you use? And I was like, well, it was like Labyrinth Archive and the Pretty Little Liches and all of that. And he's like, oh, so the best ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, what are you wanting to dive into, Tyrant? Because I've got a whole bunch of questions.
Fire them off.
Okay.
Fire them off.
Zeke, so one of the things I loved, I love bad guys that aren't just, hi, I am evil bad guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So the way you write characters, whether or not they're the bad guy, like you always have like a little section that like goes over their motivations and their relationship with the other characters in there, and I find that really useful to flesh things out. But my main question for you is NPCs. Like, some of the best NPCs we've ever had, like the Asmodeus and Sons, Office of Infernal, whatever, and the Sisterhood Beyond Space. Like these were some of like my favorite and just like player favorite NPCs ever. Like where did these come from? How do you come up with these?
So I think before I started writing adventures in earnest, I picked up a lot of adventures on the Dungeon Masters Guild. And something that I noticed very quickly stood out to me as I would read adventures and try to think about like, okay, what do I want to create? Is that I would notice when people had really interesting NPCs in the adventure, it immediately captured my attention. It made me want to role play them. It made me interested in the adventure as a whole. And so for me, I was like, okay, if this is going to be a big hook for me, then it's going to be important for me to include that sort of material in my own adventures. So I try in all of my adventures, after I write the initial draft, I actually go back through and I ask myself, like, does this NPC have at least a motivation or a fear? And those are sort of the two things that I use to help me drive to figure out, like, okay, who is this NPC? And I think playtesting also helps because often the personality that comes out in role play during a playtest is often I will include specific notes on and be like, oh, that's her. But I think the Sisterhood Beyond Space came specifically from me thinking about, I had just gone camping with my roommates, and there was a troop of Boy Scouts who were at the campsite. They were not at a group site. They were at like this like general campsite, and we were all sort of like, why are you here? What are you doing? Because they were up like early, like playing the trumpet and like all this stuff. And I was just, we were out camping, and I was just like, what would a fantasy equivalent of this look like? Like an extreme, like turned up to 25 fantasy equivalent of like the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or whatever Nature Scouts look like. And so I was like, what if it's scouts that go into the astral sea to try to find fantastic things, and that's how they earn their badges and stuff like that. So that's sort of what the Sisterhood Beyond Space started as, and then it sort of developed as I was like, obviously we'll take a series of organized, mature, and confident people to go out there. And so that's where that framework came from. And I also have to give a quick shout out to my OG D&D group, because actually one of the NPCs in every adventure is one of their characters from our first campaign, which was a 3-year-long campaign that just wrapped up 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so those characters make small appearances here and there. Madrigal in They Came from the Deep,
Yes.
Kea from the Twilight Peaks in The Three Faces of Night, Rhino Heartsbane, who is a quest giver, and Aelin Xyloshan from The Greenhouse of Nightmares were all characters from that long-running campaign. So
Love that.
That's amazing. Okay, Tyrant, you can. That was my big thing. I'll let you get into the writing process more, and then maybe
Okay.
come
Yeah.
in
No.
more.
I think since we've already kind of alluded into this, what are your primary inspirations for A, doing this in general, and B, if you can think of anything that kind of like your inspiration behind the Sisterhood. Thank you. Your inspiration behind them. If you have anything that you can think of recalling back for any of the other Pretty Little Liches content, or even your scientific based content, if you can think of that, I would love to know that.
Sure. So I am a scientist, I guess. I'm a graduate student. I study fish vision. And so something that I spend a lot of time doing is reading scientific literature, whether that's textbooks or articles released by other researchers about the work they've been doing. And if you go sort of back to when a lot of scientific work was just done on identifying new species and learning more about them in sort of a more general sense, you find a lot of really weird, interesting things, some of which are like supposition that end up not being true, some of which actually end up being founded. And so I think some of those that combination of like just a tiny bit of like guesswork and mythological thinking with these actual animals that we inhabit the world with, I sort of like take notes of that. I have what I call my inspiration journals, where I write down my dreams. I write down interesting things from articles that I read. I write down quotes from books that I like. And I have a phone in my folder where I save art or beautiful photos that I find. And whenever I want to write a new adventure, or whenever I, for whatever reason, I'm like, okay, time for the next thing to get started. I dive into that and I find things that I've tried to find like through lines, which I'm sure is something every GM is familiar with, right? You're like reading an adventure and then you read the character backstories and you're like, what are the invisible through lines here where I can just nicely tie each character into this story to make this story about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do something very similar with my inspiration journal. I read through and I'm like, okay, I wrote about these frogs and there's something interesting going on with these frogs. And then I also have in my phone these two beautiful pictures of a waterfall in a rainforest. And what if this adventure is about Kuatoa, whose faith created a gigantic frog with these qualities, sort of like trying to create that story through line. And so oftentimes I try to just let it arise as organically as I can, right. And then jam that into a first draft and talk with editors about like what here makes sense, and getting a lot of really fun and good developmental feedback, and using that to refine the adventure down to like the crystallized fun fantasy of whatever is underneath that idea. So I think that's often where I try to let my inspiration come from. So for scientific secrets, it can be something as simple as these birds eat bone. What does a cool monster based on a bird that eats bone look like? And then what I created from that for Scientific Secrets of Avernus was a hyena that eats bone and reconstructs the bone inside its body, and then can actually like project its own skeleton outside of its body to injure foes around it. And then I was like, how would that be connected to this adventure? well, there's a Yinogu, who is the demon lord of gnolls, so connected to hyenas, is featured in this adventure as sort of an important part. So tying that lore in there and then adding the monster that way creates a really easy way for someone to introduce these creatures and their scary bone bite.
So just to clarify, it seems you're saying that all of the scientific base is coming from you. I had that question kind of looking at your content yesterday. Was it a team of scientists that you confer with, or is it all you? So it is all you. That's just finding these scientific details and making the monsters out of them, right?
Oh, I see. So for the field guides, which are just me, or all of them except for the owlbears are just me, I develop everything. But on all my collaborations, I give my collaborators, the other writers who are working with me on the projects, like Scientific Secrets of Avernus had a lot of great creators on it. The Scientific Secrets of Icewind Dale and Saltmarsh also had a ton of great creators on them. And I basically give them the brief of, inspire this with science. I would like to see some sort of citation, if possible, like from where you got the information about what the original idea came from.
Right.
And then they build the monster. And then for 2 of those projects, I was the editor, and for another, Leon Barillion was the editor, and they're amazing. And so we worked with the writers to sort of make sure that those concepts, that their monsters fit within the concept. So the writers all get credit for their own creations. They found the science, they found the inspiration. I was just the one who came up with the concept and brought everybody together for it.
No, that's incredible. I love that you have a clear system where you can trace back where the idea originated, and you can find the real world equivalent, right? And so
yeah,
it's so cool to see that. And you've been talking about the editorial process of creating your content, and I wanted to talk about that before I forgot. So do you put all of your work through an editor, or do you sometimes, try to I'm sure you proofread and self-edit it, but it's nice to see someone going through an editor, because most professional work does go through an editor, if not all. And so I'm sure with your schooling background and you getting a PhD, you've probably put some papers through an editor before, maybe.
Yeah, I'm definitely familiar with the process, and although it's very different when it's in an academic setting, where oftentimes they want the paper to be as obtuse and jargon-filled as possible, oftentimes with RPG content, you instead want it to be as approachable and clear as possible. And I am sort of just ribbing the field a little bit. Obviously, we don't want every paper to be like filled with jargon and unreadable, but it does feel that way sometimes. You pick up a paper just outside your expertise where it can just be a complete mess and you have no idea what they're talking about. But you're absolutely right. I think the editorial process is really important, and is something that when I was a fledgling creator and I was just starting to put out adventures and monsters and stuff like that, I did a lot of just self-editing, where I would just read through it and then be like, looks good, let's go. But as I have actually had a little bit more time to think about what I want my work to look like and what do other people in the field do, I've come to realize that editing, especially for, I guess, bigger content, like if I'm just releasing like 10 monsters, then I'm usually good to do a sweep of them myself and proofread and stuff like that and be relatively satisfied with it. But especially if I'm writing an adventure, or if I've got something bigger like a Scientific Secrets on deck, then I really want to make sure that I get someone whose specific role is to edit the project. And someone who I worked with on Pretty Little Liches, and I messed up their name before, it's Leon Barilero, but they're amazing and absolutely incredible editor. They gave a ton of fantastic feedback on top of, finding any of the little spelling mistakes and grammatical mistakes or style guide errors that I would make, especially because I was still relatively fresh when I first started PLL. But having that sort of communication about the project really helped it blossom in a way that, I mean, contributed greatly to the fantastic experience that you both had running the adventures. Honestly, they would not have been as I would not be nearly as proud of them if it hadn't been that sort of back and forth process, this open communication and discussion about what the adventure is and what we want it to be.
Right.
So I have a great deal to thank Leon for with that. They're a fantastic editor. So if anybody watching ever needs an editor, you should absolutely reach out to them. But I think, yeah, the editorial process has definitely become like a must-have whenever I'm working on anything more than a couple pages.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And you said back when you were a fledgling creator, how long have you been doing this?
So I think my first product was either in late 2017 or early 2018.
Okay.
And that was sort of, I took a bunch of content that I had homebrewed for my campaign, and I was like, well, I'll just put this out there like for pay what you want on the Dungeon Masters Guild. I don't really have the polish that a lot of the other sort of paid products I saw in there had. So I was like, just put it out there, see what people think, if anybody picks it up. And found, it was, people were picking it up, and that some people were even giving me a little bit of money for it. And so I was like, sort of got that high, and I was like, oh, gonna chase this high. So, I released another Pay What You Want supplement, and I think I submitted 3 Pay What You Want supplements before I was like, felt confident in my ability and having gotten an opportunity to look at the landscape and figure out what it was that an adventure looked like and what was expected. And that's when I wrote my first adventure. Which actually, JVC Perry, who is another fantastic creator in the Dungeon Masters Guild, had put out, I don't remember if he specifically reached out to me or if he put out a statement about, like, I am looking to produce adventures from new creators. And so he really gave me the jumpstart that I needed, where I was like, well, I have this one shot that I ran and seems good, and I'd like to publish, but I don't really know what that looks like. And he sort of helped me put it through the style guide and showed me like where to find commercial free art and stuff like that, and sort of helped me build out that adventure. So that was Winter's Breath. And thanks to the fantastic experience I had working with him, I felt confident enough to start writing and publishing my own adventures. So I wrote 2 adventures and then a couple of little bestiaries before I was like, full on, like, got an editor, got a layout designer, and all these other things, and really started the train rolling on the side hustle.
Right. So you've been doing content creation, publishing content creation for better part of 2.5, 3 years now. How long have you been playing TTRPGs? How long have you been GMing TTRPGs? It's a favorite question of anyone who is in this world. So I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask.
Absolutely. So I'm going to out myself. I'm a baby. I'm a child. I'm an infant TTRPG player. I actually started in November of 2017. So
wow.
That's when I started. I was GMing. Yo, yeah. And I immediately, started listening to a couple of different live play podcasts. I guess until that point, I was like, I had always, or not always, I remember having this sort of like vague interest in it. And then at a certain point, a podcast network I was listening to had released a live play podcast, and I was like, okay, I'm in graduate school studying daddy long leg penises. Like, I can't be like, I'm not that nerdy anymore. So I just started listening, learned how to play, immediately got really interested. And the rest is history, I guess. I started running my own adventures and wanted to, I guess that is sort of the producing content for the DMs Guild is often or any TTRPG is like the perfect balance of like, I want to put stuff out there that people can use and that helps GMs, and also like is the most self-indulgent thing ever, where I'm like, look at this thing I made, use it please. Like
no, I get that. I had a question. So you talk about all this science and everything that inspires, but I see like on your Twitter you're always talking about like, this week I'm watching this horror movie, and then it's back to Mean Girls for comfort. And Like with all of the personality and kind of humor that you mix into your setting and your characters, like what's the media that most influences you? Like I'm constantly just like, yep, I like this from this TV show, I like this from this movie, this from this book, and I'm just gonna take it all and mix it in. So what are the things that you borrow from the most?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid question. I constantly use that Thanos meme of him like ripping the gem
Yes,
out of
exactly.
Vision's forehead and like putting it in the gauntlet. It's like media I like, rip it out, put it into my TTRPG campaign.
Exactly.
So yeah, if you go to my Twitter feed, you do find that I watch a lot of horror movies. I guess growing up, I always wandered the aisles of TBT Blockbuster and would like look at the horror movie covers. Could never check any of them out because I have 3 younger siblings, and my parents were like, no. But I was always interested by the genre, and I started reading a lot more of it when I got into high school, and then when I went to college, and had my own space, not surrounded by little kids, or not little kids, my little siblings. I would watch scary movies more. And in graduate school, my house started this tradition where we stream a horror movie every Monday to like everybody else in the program or our friends who want to join. And so every week, at least, I watch one horror movie. And so actually, we finished our last horror movie Monday list last week. So we've watched 60 horror movies in like something like 60 or 61 weeks. So it's been more than an annual tradition, but more than a year now. So I love horror media. I take a lot of ideas from horror media for sure. Growing up, I enjoyed sci-fi and fantasy, but I never really for whatever reason, I often didn't feel like as invested in it as I did in some other media. But this past year, I've started reading a lot more queer fantasy and sci-fi, which just resonates with me as a queer person a lot more. And so I've been stealing ideas from that content that I've been enjoying a lot. Yeah, I mean, if you have read the right thing or seen the right movie and you jump into like one of my adventures or one of my campaigns at home, you could probably just be like, is this the thing? That's like the thing.
I'm pretty sure this is the thing. This is from that thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And jumping in real quick, we have a member of our community, one of our GMs, who actually just ran a one shot based off of a movie that he co-wrote and produced. So if you're looking for a new horror movie to watch, They Live Inside Us is it. The few images I've seen from the movie, I, for one, being a horror aficionado, want to watch it, and so I'm waiting to find the perfect person to watch it with. Since some people don't like horror content.
Nope. Listen, I love gothic horror. I love Curse of Strahd. I love the that sort of thing, but actual scary movies, I just can't. I was forced to watch The Ring and then It Follows, and both I'm still not over.
The trauma.
The trauma. It's like middle of the night, I have to go pee or something. It's like, I'm gonna die on the way. I can't.
It's funny because one of my housemates who moved in with me after we started the Horror Movie Monday thing, they were like, I don't do horror movies. Like, I appreciate the offer, but I don't think I'm going to watch them with you. And I was like, just watch like 1 or 2 with us. There's a bunch of people there, so it's not as scary. People talk during the movie, so it's not like oppressively frightening. And they watched Hereditary and then something else with us, and they were like completely hooked. They were like, oh my God, I didn't realize like horror movies can still be good movies. So it's a genre that gets a bad rap, but you got to get a little bit of a thrill, you got to get that heart beating, you got to get a little freaked out, maybe you want to like puke just like a little bit sometimes, but it's so worth it.
Exactly.
I can't. I watched it, and like I recognized that was like a good movie. I enjoyed it. clowns don't really get me, and like the fear of fear doesn't really get to me.
Right.
But like dude, it follows that like ever stalking thing just
Oh,
nope.
so delicious.
No, it just replays, and everyone else watches the movie, and then they move on with their lives, and I'm just sitting there like, it's still happening to me. Just replays in my mind. No, I can't do horror movies. Nope.
You know,
That's okay.
I have a biased opinion on that, but it's fine. So hey, we have a couple questions from the audience.
Oh, sure.
That I think would be appropriate to ask now, and then before we dive into specifically the creation process and certain things that you may do, we should take a break and refill our coffee because I am completely out and I'm going to go insane if I don't have any more. So, Cole Robbie asks, what advice would you give someone who is interested in writing / releasing for DM's Guild? And I would like to tag on to that. Do you also have any advice for GMs who may just want to homebrew some content for their home campaigns?
Yeah, those are both very good questions. When it comes to publishing on the Guild, I think the first thing you should do is become a part of some sort of community adjacent to what you want to create on, right? So if you're interested in writing for D&D 5e, then there are a couple of Facebook groups you can join. There's a Discord. There's obviously the Twitter sphere. I mean, it is a little bit of a hell site, but like there's lots of great people on it too. And if you just take the opportunity to sort of like figure out like, okay, who are the people that I want to write like who else writes adventures like the sorts of adventures I would write. So for example, if you're really interested in writing for Ravenloft, you have to follow Oliver Clegg, for example. If you want to write, if you want to create zany, over the top, really like action-packed adventures, then you probably want to follow people like James Introcaso, Alex Clippinger. If you want to write science-inspired content, you can follow me to plug myself. And so just sort of find people adjacent to what you want to do or in that sort of sphere, follow them, look at some of their content. And there is a lot of pay what you want or free content even that you can look up on the Guild, check it out, see what sort of what the style guide looks like, see what other people are producing, and either get involved with small collaborations. So keep an eye out there are constantly calls for short adventures or monsters or magic items for all sorts of collaborative efforts. And that is a really, really great way to dip your toes in because you don't have to do all the production. You don't have to find art often. All you have to do is just follow your brief and write whatever it is you signed up to write. And so getting involved with that can be a great, great start, and also helps you make connections with probably great people. I did a lot of collaborations this year with fantastic people who I will be forever grateful to. And just building those connections and eventually becoming confident enough to write your own fully fledged material that you can then publish yourself using. You can even use something free like GM Binder or Homebrewery, or if you're like, I'm really feeling confident and I want to get into this, then you can get like an actual layout program for yourself. But yeah, I think immersing yourself in that community and looking at the content like what you want to make is sort of the number one step for sure if you want to create. And I think advice for GMs who want to homebrew their own content, I think really it all comes down to just making things that are going to be fun for your table and that are fun for you. Mm-hmm. It's sort of hard to give blanket advice for that, right? But I don't know. I think session zeros are important for setting the tones of games, or if not a session zero, just talking very openly about the sort of game your players want to play. And so as long as you're going with something that you're excited for and that they're excited for, there's very little that can go like truly wrong. I mean, in that first like 3-year campaign that I ran that recently ended, one of my players was very like loved building a character that was hard to hit. And so, for magic items that I homebrewed for him, a lot of them had were powerful armor and shields and things like that. And so at the end, like with with the spell shield, he was an eldritch knight. His AC was like 32. So yeah. So sometimes you can go a little overboard, but it was still fun for everyone, And I think that's probably the number one rule. As like simple as that sounds, like doing something that will be fun for you and fun for your players, that's like the number one thing. If it's a little broken, like if it's your home game, like who cares? Yeah. And if it's a little underpowered, then that's okay because you learned from it, right? And you can make it a little bit better next time. As long as everyone at the table had a good time, which most of the time, if they keep coming back to the table, they are having a good time.
Yeah,
probably good to go, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate that you bring up the number one rule being, making sure that you create a fun environment for you and your players. We've been discussing a little bit of horror topic here. And so I think it's important for me to, in conjunction with what we've been talking about, to bring up our safety and RPG checklist that we try to promote as much as possible. Here at TPK, we have this safety and consent and TTRPG checklist that the GMs will send out to their players before every campaign, and even some one-shots if deemed necessary, that essentially the player will go through and say, this is fine, maybe not, and definitely not for these categories. And so having all of that, the GM can tailor the experience to what is okay and what is not okay, so that our players are not uncomfortable while they're playing, and generally that that level of comfort is kind of translated to the audience as well. We haven't had any instances where audience members have been uncomfortable, I don't think, and I definitely think that it's because of that extra care and precaution that we take. So I completely agree with the rule of fun. if
somebody's not safe, they're probably not having fun, right? So that completely, those two things go absolutely hand in hand.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess two more questions. Gosh, Cole. So this one is for Luka and Zeke. Cole wants to know how Luka adapted Zeke's content and the thoughts around it between the two of them.
Okay.
I love hearing this stuff. How GMs tailor adventures that I write to their table is like literally the coolest thing ever. I'm of the opinion that no adventure is as like engaging or maximally fun as it can be without that sort of GM adjustment to the table. And I think Luka did this really, really well. So I'm fascinated to hear.
Okay, so when I very first started Harper Investigations, it was set up to be like, it was set up to answer the big BBEG of D&D, which is scheduling. It's like, this is going to be a rotating one-shot campaign. And so like, and you all work for the Harper faction. So like, there's your hook why you're here. And it's also like why maybe you missed this session, but you're here this session, and we'll have a hideout, and you can just, so that people can hop in and out as their schedule allows. And it doesn't break the campaign, like why this character is suddenly missing this session. And everyone thought that I was just going to be doing one-shots. Okay, and this is this week's one-shot. And I obviously couldn't just do that. I was like, nope, we're going to have a plot, and we're going to have a bad guy, and there's a reason all these are happening. And I followed Pixar's thing that they do. I read an article a while ago that they don't ever write a movie if they don't have an ending first. So they always pick the ending. So I had always wanted to run, you mentioned Oliver Clegg, I had always wanted to run Attack of the 50-Foot Werewolf in a Bikini one-shot that he did. And it was for level 20 characters. So I was like, there's my ending. It may be, wild and ridiculous, but I want to get there, and I'm going to get there seriously. So I started off, I was like, how do we get there? It's like, I basically stole from Supernatural in the show, the Leviathan storyline, where it's like they're putting something in the food, they're putting something in the drink. It's the Cult of Malar, like we're doing all this stuff. It took a long time for anyone to even notice.
Oh yeah,
And they
for sure.
finally realized. I ran Lost Mines of Phandelver a few times. It was my very first thing I did as a DM. It was I DM'd before I ever played, so it's kind of got a special place in my heart. So I took them back to Thunder Tree, where they came across Venom Fang, because they were there to talk to Randolph and get maybe some, because he's a herbalist and everything, like maybe get an antidote for what's in the food and drink. They didn't really get to do that, and we true death TPK'd everyone in the party with something. And then the next session, I ran something from Uncaged Anthology, where they're going to this tree and there's this fountain, and this particular town seems to be exempt from what's happening because they all grow their own stuff. They all eat their own stuff, and they're like drinking from this fountain where there's this lich that has set up their phylactery in this dryad tree. Things didn't go well. They killed the dryad and they had this phylactery all of a sudden. And I had this idea for this type of lich that would set up a situation where it wasn't necessarily bad what they were doing to the people, but they still were harvesting slivers of souls for their phylactery. And it's like, okay, how do I work in this character, like, because we're getting to end game content, and I found your pretty little liches, and it was like, okay, here we go. Here are some bad guys. Here's some liches that like aren't necessarily evil. And I've got Helibonia, which is my main lich, and she's not necessarily evil. She's even a little benevolent at times. She's very much like Spike from Buffy, where it's like, why are we trying to end the world? Like, I like the world. This is where I get my food. Let's keep it alive. So it's like, let's put a stop to Cult of Malar. And I basically went off of the Greenhouse of Nightmares, where they all went to this school once upon a time, and it's like, what if the Harry Potter crew was like, hey, we could live forever? Like, what if we took this sorcerer's stone and, really, like Hermione's like, I really need to study. I've got so much to learn. What if I could just have forever? Like, forget the time turner. Let's just be a lich, So I kind of had it like that, where they were all going to this university eons ago, and decided one day, hey, let's form a pact. Let's become liches. And like, I did make, I forget her name now, from Greenhouse. I made her kind of my actual, like, Regina George character. Where she
Simea, yeah.
Yeah,
when she
thank you.
Venom Fang and everyone was shook, I was like,
Yeah.
living for it.
I was reading the adventure, and I got to the end where it was like, she can true polymorph into the green dragon. I was like, what? Oh my god. I was like, this is gonna be a moment for them all. Like, have her be Venom Fang. Like, and her personality is very much, like, I had her very much that, like, green dragon kind of personality. But yeah, so I don't know. It was this whole thing, and I was like, now I have a way to have people go search for relics to help them in the end fight. Like, have each of these liches have something that they need, whether it's information or whatever. Have Thymia have all the, like, herbal remedies and antidotes, and Targareth was like, I made them kind of like the nerd, where they don't really care about everything that's going on. They've gone out to the astral sea. They're trying to come up with their like special spell. Yeah, like, it's like, yeah, whatever. I became the lich to, like, do this. Like, this is what I'm doing. You guys can deal with all that. I'm doing this. And so, like, they went through this whole thing fighting all these illithids, and then they get to the end and it's like, yeah, that's great, guys, but I'm trying to come up with this 10th level spell. If you could just hurry out of here. It's just, I'm trying to nerd over here. So it became like the perfect setting to like kind of build out around my not
Within the
BBEG
framework of
character.
your story.
Yeah, like and kind of give like an end game structure to like, okay, you know now who the bad guys are, you know now like what you need to do. You got to stop the Cult of Malar. It's going to happen in Waterdeep, but now you need to go and get all the things. Go and quest for all the items that'll help you do it, help you stop it. So it just kind of gave me all of that and the interesting characters that everyone can come across, because it's end game content. Like, let's not just trade blows and like, you know, just eventually like HP versus AC versus attack. Like, you want something that's
a
like
little extra
something to engage with that late in the game. Like, we're so far past just like trading blows and hack and slash. Like, let's get to know our BBEGs and these powerful liches that are just hanging out, doing their spells, or, you know, taking over their old university and murdering everyone. So, yeah, that's kind of how I adapted. It fit so well. And then the labyrinth, like sending everyone off to find information, like, I loved that whole, like, you know, to the library moment where it's like, let's go and like just go through this magical library where honestly I'm gonna just keep bringing that back every season. Like, it's such a wonderful place to go, and like the possibilities are endless. Yeah, that's how I adapted.
And I want to get to this next question, and it follows up very nicely. Cole also asked, were there any spins that Luka put on characters that Zeke was surprised about? But I also want to say, Zeke, you watching the Greenhouse of Nightmares run through that we did, how do you feel about the fact that Thymia is a character you created that is now immortalized in song?
Well, first of all, like, just whenever folks run my adventures, whether that's like privately and they send me a message or on stream like y'all did, is like, it just is so rewarding for me, because it feels like, you know, I put so much time and energy into creating this series that was like really my first big foray into one of the things I really wanted to do from the very start, which is create tier 4 adventures, because there's so few of them on the guild. And to see you all run it and engage with it, and to see how Luka really like just absolutely perfectly slotted it into your campaign was amazing. And I was really truly shook, like just every minute, like everything that happened. It was so much fun to watch. I stayed up very late to do so. I mean, we all did.
That's
to play
Harper's,
it and watch.
yeah.
But and that was absolutely incredible. And just like I will literally never forget like the moment when Thymia turned into Venom Fang, and literally across the board, almost every character was just like, either holy, what just happened, this lady just turned into a dragon, or oh my god, it's that dragon. For some of the characters who were there for that TPK, was really, really fun. So that was really amazing. I mean, truly, it was really awesome.
Yeah. And for those of you in chat that don't know what I'm referring to, our very own Sir Hecalock wrote a parody of Giants in the Sky, which is now Harper's in the Sky, if I'm saying that right.
I think so.
And it was written by Sir Hecalock and performed by DMF Saint, and you can find that on our YouTube, I believe. It is incredible.
Very cool.
Being also my character also being in that song was, I had a very visceral reaction to hearing it for the first time. It's like getting immortalized in yourself immortalized in a song, like you're in an epic portrayal of something now, and so it's like, oh my god, what have I done?
You've made it into
Very
a
cool.
bard's ballad officially.
I know,
Like...
it's like Dandelion the poet is singing about me now. But no, those are the questions we have for the first part. I am going to recommend a 5-minute intermission.
And we're live.
Welcome back. What I forgot to say at the end of the first part is this episode brought to you by Mediocre Coffee with No Name, because we are not sponsored.
Sadness.
We are not sponsored.
We're not sponsored, and we're poor.
Yes.
So it's like 2 double whammies every morning.
So if you'd like to be in this time slot as one of our sponsors and you are a coffee company, you know where to find me.
There must
Support your cold, sad coffee drinkers.
And just to clarify, you can find me at Twitch and Twitter at drtyrant.com. Wait, not .com. That doesn't make sense. Secondly, as we dive into the second part of our show, if you do have any questions, and I've seen a few in chat already, if you do have any questions, please put them in chat, and we will be sure to get to them before the end of the episode. So, Zeke, talking specifically about your process of content creation, is there a specific method you follow? What do you have guidelines? Do you have a structure, or is it kind of just you have this idea and then you just kind of throw thoughts at it? How would you say you go about that?
Believe it or not, I'm actually a pretty fastidious person, and I do have a pretty strict guideline that I tend to follow when I'm creating anything. The first thing I do when I guess I'll talk about adventure writing, because that's probably a little bit more nuanced and maybe a little bit more interesting than monster creation, which is basically like find inspiration, decide a CR, make the monster. Is there something extra cool about this monster? Add something extra cool about this monster, stamp of approval. But for adventure writing, I tend to, there's one of 2 avenues to like inspiration, right? One is I ran an adventure in one of my campaigns that was either went really well, like all the players were really engaged, or I just really personally enjoyed it, or whatever the case might be. Like, the average session, everyone has fun, it's probably like a 7 or 8, but every once in a while you have one of those sessions that's like a 10 that like everyone walks away from and is like, wow, that was like a great, super fun session. And so typically when those happen, that is inspiration for me to be like, this I should make into an adventure, so that ideally maybe other people can capture that little bit of spirit. And also, like I mentioned before, it's a little bit narcissistic, which is fine. I've accepted that about myself. And the other alternate route, which we talked about a little bit before, is I'm like, okay, I have cleared my slate. I would love to write an adventure. So I go through my inspiration journal, or something that I've recently read or watched or whatever really captures my attention, pull some of those threads together. And I always start with a really, with an outline. So what are some encounters, ideas, hooks? I like for all of my adventures to have multiple possible conclusions. So ideally, I like to make sure that is part of the outline too. Like, what are different, I like there to be different moving parts in the adventure so that every group who plays it can have a different outcome. And so I try to incorporate that into the design. And once I feel confident that I have a good set of like, okay, there's going to be a cool skill challenge here, there's going to be this interesting foe or quest giver or mystery or whatever. And once I have all that fleshed out, then I typically go in, I start at the top. So introduction, tips for DMs, and then I write the outline of the adventure. And I normally try to go through the first time sequentially in the order the adventure would probably be played. And then once I'm done, I go back over it and I'm like, okay, what here is weak? What here is like maybe a 5 on the fantasy scale and could be cranked up to a 10. What is like maybe a little over the top and out of tone with the rest of the adventure, and sort of try to like shuffle everything into line. which is sort of, I always mentally visualize like taking the Jenga tower after you've like stacked up all the blocks and like putting the thing back over it to straighten it out, is sort of how I imagine that goes. And then a proofreading, and then I send it to my editor, whoever my editor for that project is. And while I send it to the editor is typically when I look for art that's related to the adventure, buying stock art or finding appropriate commercial use art, like the art packs offered by the DMG, or going through other avenues. And then I get my revisions back, generally go through all of those, add in the art, see how everything looks. I generally try to have at least a couple of emails back and forth or a short conversation with the editor, just saying like, overall, what do you think the strong points are? What are the weak points? They typically point out some areas where like, there needs to be more connective tissue between this idea and this idea. It's obvious it makes sense to you, but the DM might not get it, stuff like that. And then once I've gone through however many rounds of revision the editor and I have agreed on, I send it to my layout artist, or my layout designer, Anya Svar, who I've also worked with Natalie Ash, and both of them are fantastic, really beautiful, very sleek layout that always matches the adventure really nicely. And then once I get that back, it all becomes about having a short dialogue with them, making the adventure look the way I imagine. And then it is time for the hardest part, which is advertising. A little bit of advertising and then release. So that's sort of the typical schedule I follow, which is a lot more detail than I typically go into. So that's sort of like the A to Z process.
Right.
Can I just say, as like someone who's ran your stuff versus a lot of other content on the DMG, the way you lay it out at the very beginning, most specifically the like, you usually list it as like a pronunciation guide, right? But it's really, for me, it's right, like, it's like on the second page. It's like, here are all the NPCs. Here's how to pronounce their name and a short description of who they are. And it's just, because sometimes I'll be going through and it's like, and here's this NPC, and it's like, wait, who? Where? I need this NPC is here now. I didn't even catch this in the first read through. So it's like, it's so nice, especially when I'm putting everything into Roll20 as like handouts or creating the characters. It's like I can just go down this list and it's like, this person, they're here on the map, they're here, you know, it's, oh. And then your like background summaries that you give really quick. It's like, hey, this is why anyone would be here. And this is why all of the characters that they'll come across are here. Before you even start the adventure, it's just because like I now have all the NPCs, why they are here, and then why anyone would come here and come across them. And like before I even start reading the adventure, and it's very good to just set me up as like, I know what I'm doing. Like even if I like haven't had a chance to read through the whole thing, and like let's say I'm just running this off of the like, you know, on the fly, I can read that first page and be like, okay, I can wing this. I know who we are and why we're here. So I love that. So many people don't do that, and it helped so much with running things and like knowing exactly why and who, and answering those two questions. So it was really nice.
I'm a forever DM, so I totally get that. And I mean, like I said, I bought and have run a lot of adventures from the DMG, and I picked up things that I really liked. I actually think the pronunciation guide came about because I ran a mystery adventure that had a ton of NPCs, and then I was really struggling when I ran it to figure out who some of the NPCs were and what their gig was, because there were so many of them. I read the adventure through one time. I didn't really take notes, and then when I was running it, I was really struggling. And so I was like, okay, this is something that needs to happen. And then, of course, I released Greenhouse of, I want to say Greenhouse of Nightmares, or maybe Labyrinth Archive was the first one I released that had a pronunciation guide. I don't remember, but whichever one it was, I released the adventure with a pronunciation guide. And then literally right that same week, WotC released Descent into Avernus, which also had a pronunciation guide. And I was like, I am so validated.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think something else that like, it's very instinctive for DMs or for creators to give a ton of background information. And I've always found that to be like really overwhelming. So one of the things I do during that like first round revision process is I always cut as much as I can of the background. I'm like, what does the DM actually have to know? Because everything else, they'll probably improvise or tie into their own world. They don't need to know the nitty gritty of my homebrew world that I'm trying to pass off as like third party, not third party, but like, what's it called? A non-specific setting, right? Like they need the details of this location, why it matters. And so that's something that I really try to do. So I'm really glad to hear that worked for you.
That was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
And since we're kind of in this vein, you talked about the pronunciation guide. You talked about how you try to keep background information as succinct as possible for the people that are going to use your content. What other specific considerations do you take for of GM's needs, or what you've seen as their wants and desires for using your content, using content in general? Do you think a lot about that, or is it kind of like, oh, this is what I would want, and so that's how you formulate?
I think it's a combination of the two, especially as I have gotten more, I guess, organized and had more experience in creating content. I try to think as much as I can about what DMs need and what they want at the table. So, for example, something that I didn't do as much in the original adventures that I'm going to start trying to do now is if a stat block is only relevant to one encounter, putting that stat block on the page with that encounter, so the DM doesn't have to scroll all the way down to the appendix and then scroll back up like, oh wait, what's their motivation? Scroll back up. Oh, there's this other character. Where's their So that's something that I'm trying to incorporate more. And actually, with the Pretty Little Liches adventures, I have these sort of like soft stretch goals, which as they hit best-selling medals on the DM's Guild, I add more content. And in the new content, one of the early ones is additional random encounters for the environment that the dungeon is in. I worked with my layout designer, and she is amazing, like I said, and just putting those stat blocks for those random encounters just right there on that page. And we were very specific about making sure that they are right next to the encounter, so the DM doesn't have to go anywhere. If they roll a 2 on that random encounter and they're fighting the arcane lore anglerfish, they can stay right on that page, run the whole encounter, and they have all the information they need right there. And so that's something that I'm trying to like lean into a little bit more. And something else that I always do, and this is something that I learned from JVC Perry, is I always include after my intro a section I call tips for the DM, which is about like, this is the level range this adventure is intended for. And so, for example, because Pretty Little Liches is all tier 4 content, that can be really hard content to run, and the monsters can be really complex. And so I include some tips there, especially if this is like one of the first adventures someone has picked up. Most experienced DMs will probably skim that section and be like, yeah, I know. But for anyone who is, hasn't maybe run adventures for characters to that level or whatever the case might be, I try to include some information about like, these are the ways I keep encounters dynamic in my own personal games. I encourage you to take a look at the stat block, leave what you don't want, take what you like, add whatever else you need. If something's not going to be fun, like if a monster's ability to stun characters is not going to be fun at your table, like like that just takes characters out of it, people start looking at their phones or whatever, then take that ability out, slap on some extra damage or whatever. And so I try to give tips like that, and also advice for especially how to make tier 4 boss fights dynamic, because a tier 4 boss, there is every chance that the parties go in there. If they roll the right initiative and if they really hit with those spells and those attacks, that monster can be gone before it has, 2 rounds to do anything fun. And that's not necessarily fun for the DM. And it's also honestly can be very anticlimactic for the players. So giving advice on turning up hit points, giving advice on like, okay, when the first round of combat, the boss will probably do something like this. The second round of combat, they'll focus on this. Third round of combat, giving advice on what spells they might use, when they would use what legendary actions. And actually in the Mythic Odysseys of Theros, they created the mythic monster rules, which are basically like 2-stage boss fights. So those sort of mechanics that I wove into the Pretty Little Liches campaign were like, when they hit less than half their hit points, this happens, is something that's like a canonical thing now. So I'm just going to be taking that mythic stuff and running with it, because I love a 2-stage boss fight. My players are constantly calling me on it. They're like, oh, this isn't even her final form. And I'm like, you're right.
right, she's gonna turn into a dragon. Yeah, no, that it's honestly wonderful. So I've always struggled, like I'm better at the narrative than I am at the combat. So like I got this, like, the monsters know what they're doing, and it's like every that's why it's like, okay, how do I what would they do in this fight? Because normally I just go in, I'm like, I don't know, I'm just here to fight. I was telling the story, and now I've got to kill you, I guess.
Circle of death? Circle of death? Circle of death? Anyone? We're sending this back to the kitchen?
Let's
Do you want
just go. So it's really nice that you like include stuff like that, because that means I don't have to go and try and read, especially since your characters are so unique. It's like, yes, this has a section on liches, but like it doesn't have a section on Thymea, so yeah, it's very, very useful that that's in there for all of us non-combat DMs.
I'm also mechanics chump. I've had to force myself to learn mechanics and figure out what are ways a boss can survive, what's something interesting they can do. So you never fought Tag Thrith, but Tag Thrith being able to cast spells through the obelisks and getting these like automatic illusory doubles that make them harder to hit, all of those sort of mechanics, and then the watery sphere that halfway through the fight like makes the battle underwater, just stuff that creates a very hopefully in my mind cinematic fight that is memorable. Yes. I'm sorry, cut you off.
No, okay.
No, absolutely. So I have a very small question that's been burning in my mind, and then I have another one. But so for those of you who are watching, who have watched at least a good amount of TPK content, you will know about one of my specific fears that we won't talk about. However, while Luka was running one of your one-shots, one of my other very specific fears in real life came into the game. And so I was wondering if it was her or you that put the Nightwalker in that one-shot in the Oniri game.
In 3 Phases of Night, yeah.
There is a possibility for a Nightwalker to arrive in 3 Phases of Night. I will say the alternative is probably worse, to be honest. But sorry you had to deal with that.
Not to me. It's not worse to me. Like, so I had this Adventurer's Guide book made by Wizards of the Coast when I was 8 or something like that. That I had no idea what D&D was. I had never even heard of it, but I had this book.
Choose my own adventure book. Fun.
Yeah. And so I, going through it was so cool because I was huge into fantasy and that kind of stuff when I was a kid, and they had pages of monsters and equipment and characters and factions and all this kind of stuff. And then you're flipping through it, and then you get to the Nightwalker page, and I kid you not, I saw that for the first time. I was like, nope.
That sucker is scary for sure.
It gave me, like, reading about it and knowing what it was, like, it for sure gave me nightmares for a long time. Just a little aside for those of you who are wondering what my fears are in chat. Good Lord. But yeah, back to my regular scheduled content. So you mentioned earlier that sometimes when you have nothing else kind of that you're working on at the moment, you'll refer back to your idea journal. Do you typically work on a lot of different things at once, or do you like to stay in the mindset of this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to get done? Obviously, for a lot of TTRPG creators, it's the hard thing for me, at least, is I'll be working on something and then I'm like, oh wait, but what about this? And then I'll work on that for a little bit. And, oh wait, I have this. Oh, but wait, there's another thing. So does that kind of happen to you? And how do you manage that?
Absolutely. I think a creator of any kind, whether you're writing for TTRPGs, whether you are literally writing like short stories and novels, or creating music, any type of entertainment media, because it's so personally and often emotionally driven. I think that happens to all of us, and it happens all the time to me. I mean, I typically try to organize what I work on by quarter. So like I know what I want to work on in the next quarter, and I know what the work going into that will be. I have a little document where I set up like all of my deadlines, self-imposed and collaborative deadlines for all of the projects that I'm working on. And as I go, I sort of like check off each thing. And I try to, like I mentioned before, I'm pretty fastidious about these sorts of things. So I generally try to like knock out the earliest deadline. And then the next time I sit down, I'm like, okay, I can only work on the next deadline. But of course, sometimes the call of a new project just can't be resisted. I think the perfect example is I was still working on Scientific Secrets of Avernus, which it was a lot of work, a lot of like organizing collaborators, sending emails, advertising, working with Leon, who is the editor for that project, talking to Anya, who is the layout designer for that project, and just really trying to like make sure everyone felt in the loop and like there was good communication and everyone knew what stage the project was at. So that was a lot of work on top of creating my own monsters that I wanted to be as like fun and engaging and tied into that setting as I could. And then suddenly this inspiration hit me and I was like, we have the classic owl bear, right? Well, what if we had owl bears that were combinations of different birds and bears and could do some of the weird, funky things that some of those animals can do? So that's how Outrageous Owlbears was born. And of course I was like, well, I can't do this project myself. Like people will come up with so many cool different things if I open the call. So I sort of took in a few different creators and asked them if they were interested and got a small team together. And while I was working on Scientific Secrets of Avernus and producing that, I also was working on Outrageous Owlbears and producing that, which although it was smaller, it was basically the whole, like this very similar thing, just scaled down and with twice the citations, because I asked for a citation for every bird and every bear part of every animal. And I am so proud of Outrageous Owlbears. I think it is like some of the most fun, silly, funky permutations of owlbears. Like there's basically one for every environment you can think of. And so it can add a lot of like, DMs can read it and they find the owl bear that like stands out to them, and then it can be the perfect little bit of world building just to include that sort of owl bear. You can build up a little bit of lore around it or whatever you want. So anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying like, yes, it absolutely happens, and yes, sometimes I succumb to the to the desire, to the meme of looking over my shoulder at the next hottest project. So yeah, I try to resist as much as I can. I have a little like brainstorming document where I like will put down my ideas and lots of exclamation points to remind myself of the things I'm excited for when I have time to work on them. And that document's a mess, let me tell you. But
the more exclamation points, the more urgent this idea is. Yes, exactly. No, I understand this organization process.
Yeah, exactly. Like I have there's a level 1 to 20 campaign, the outline that I've been working on just like in the background, back burner for the longest time, but it's just the right length and there's enough arcs that like whenever I have like a really good adventure idea, I'm like, blunk, just slam that in there. So there's always background stuff happening. I can't resist the lore as organized as I like to pretend I am. Sometimes it's just impossible to resist.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of your methods of organization and keeping notes and stuff like that, what other tools do you use for the process of creating monsters, for the process of creating your adventure content? Do you use, like, for instance, I've homebrewed a few things for one shots that I've done. So like specific monsters for them, and I do that in D&D Beyond, stuff like that. What kind of tools do you like to use?
It sounds kind of dark-sided, but I normally just have a Google Doc and I have like a little monster template and I literally just fill it out there. And at this point, I've made so many monsters that I have a pretty good instinctive sense of like the CR calculator, which can often be the tricky part. Like what's the offensive CR? What's the defensive CR? What is that balance to and how much XP is that? Yeah, like I said, pretty dark-sided, but I pretty much just have a very strong sense for that now. And I always check my work using the DMG rules, which, often results in over CRing a little bit, but that's Wizards rules, so I'm going to follow them. I honestly typically use my Google Drive to collaborate and organize, my email to collaborate and organize. But I guess I'm not really that interesting. I don't have like a lot of like tools that I use. I don't have like software that helps me. I don't do my own layout most of the time. So Anya does her magic and waves her magic wand over her computer screen. Sorry, very simple, easy answer. I pretty much use Google Chrome for almost everything.
Yeah. Same.
Totally fine. I mean, to each their own. I know, certain things work for certain people. Some people like to use, whatever is at their disposal. Like, for instance, if I mean, this isn't TTRPG related necessarily, but if I'm trying to write a research paper, I will use, EasyBib for the bibliography. So, specific stuff like that. Obviously, using the editor as a resource is one of the things that you do.
That's true. Yes, I am a big fan of collaborative work, and whether that's like me working with an editor and a layout designer, or whether that's just me and a layout designer for a really small project, just having that little bit of communication and conversation that just evolves around a project always makes it better.
And I'm sure you either find people on Twitter or DMs Guild to help with like specific elements of your content, like maps or tokens, stuff like that. Elements of the one shot or something.
Yeah, Dyson Logos is a great source for maps. I bought all of Dyson's map packs, and I generally use those maps. But I also follow a ton of great artists, a ton of great cartographers. I follow just lots of people in the TTRPG space. And so oftentimes if I see an opening that somebody like has an opening for work around the time that I'm looking for something, I will like immediately reach out and see if I can snag them up for that project, because I guess that's totally right. Like working with other people, while not necessarily like a tool, is definitely a fantastic resource for the quality of any project for sure.
Right.
And I guess for the references and citations for the scientific projects, I use Zotero.
Gotcha.
Have a little subfolder in my Zotero. Like I have all my like literature review, thesis, all these things, and then one of them just says like D&D, and inside of that there's like 6 folders with like different D&D projects. Each one has like a citation for every monster, etc. So.
Mm-hmm. And Luka, do you use anything yourself for that? No. Okay.
Docs, or I'm just talking at my phone and it's going into Google Keep, things like that. I also just folders on my drive, which I have backed up to Google so that like I can access it from my phone if I'm not near my computer. So it's just like, and it's all like organized. Like when I did Harper's, I created all of the folders for the sessions like ahead of time. So this one's going to be on November, whatever, it's episode this number, and it's going to be this one shot. And then if I found something that was like, that's perfect for that, I'll either throw it into a text doc, like a text file, like, and save it in that folder, or like an image or a map and save it in that folder, so that when it came time to prep that session, all I had to do was open up the folder for that session. And it's like, oh, look at all this stuff I've already saved for here. Okay, let's put this all together into the one coherent package.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just kind of how I do. I don't really have any special tools either, just folders and Google Docs.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, to each their own. So Zeke, and don't take that as me being like salty or anything.
No, it's fine. To each their own. Me and my folders.
If you find tools that work for you, like Luka and I use Google apparently.
Exactly.
If you find tools that work for you, then that works for you and your style.
Yeah.
No reason to change it up. I mean, we're probably not telling you a tool you don't already know about, which is bad, but
No. I mean, Google is extremely powerful, so there's nothing wrong with that. So Zeke, a lot of what you've already done has been in the D&D 5e realm.
Mm-hmm.
As this is a TTRPG show summatively, I think a lot of people are wondering if you are interested in and have plans to branch out into any other TTRPG systems.
I absolutely do. It's hard because when you build your audience in one system, it can be that oftentimes that audience isn't looking for material in other games, but it is something I'm really looking forward to, because as a GM, I am trying to branch out more and encourage my groups to either use new games as like mini games within our game, like where we have 2 sessions of a different game, or use a different game for world building or whatever collaborative effort we have going on. I've finally convinced my Sunday morning group, which is Curse of Strahd, that when we are done with Curse of Strahd, we're actually going to do a Monster of the Week campaign afterwards, and we are going to do a session 0 that is a combination of the Dresden Files, city creation rules, and The Quiet Year, which is a fantastic game by Buried Without Ceremony. That's a map making game, and I have been wanting to use it as a session 0 to collaboratively build a world for a really long time. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm hoping to take the mysteries that I run for that adventure and create a 13 episode or 13 mystery campaign arc that I can release on TTRPG through DT or Drive Through RPG. Through Monster of the Week's community content program. I'm also have really been enthralled lately by Trophy Dark, which is a really fun sort of super collaborative role-playing game about treasure hunters, more or less a doomed treasure hunters, going into a dark setting to try to scrounge up a living and find some sort of treasure that will get them out of some sort of trouble or whatever. And I'm actually going to use that as a one-shot inside of Curse of Strahd, where we know the characters are going into a dreamscape to try to reclaim the soul of one of the characters' dead wives, and who died like a long time ago. He found out he's been resurrected. A whole, character backstory situation.
Campaign stuff,
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
So what I'm going to do is ask the characters to make their D&D characters in Trophy Dark as like spirits who might be lost during this quest to find her.
Oh, that's awesome.
Using that
really
as the framework for the story and see how it goes. I'm really excited for that. And so if that goes well, I might also publish that Trophy Dark game, which, for those familiar with Trophy Dark, know every incursion, which is what like an adventure in Trophy Dark is called, is based on a theme, and the theme of this one is guilt. So it should be very character driven and provide lots of opportunities for people to come up with really horrible things their characters have done to other people that they regret.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Okay, we have a number of questions from the audience.
So many questions.
So I think we should definitely start getting to those.
Awesome.
But thank you so much for all of the answers you've already given, Zeke.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to me learning about other writers' creation process, and as someone who loves writing but never gets the time to, I really appreciate it. Although I feel like you're so much more busy than me, so maybe I should reevaluate my life.
Everyone is so busy, and anytime we aren't busy right now, we're busy being crushed by existential dread and the weight of the world. So
this is fair.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm putting so much into D&D and like TTRPGs. It's like let's just go over here for a while. Like let's go to Barovia. Like Barovia is better than here. Yes, let's go over here. Hi, Strahd. Like you're a better
Yeah, every game of my 3 campaigns a week is like a little bit of escapism, and then one of the games, which we started right before the pandemic started, is The Demon Plague by John Four and James Introcaso.
Oh, no.
And so we leave the world we're currently racked by a pandemic, which recently had a big stressful election for a lot of people, into a campaign where there is an epidemic and a big upcoming town council election. So it's very funny.
Listen, you're able to explore those terrifying real life narratives through the safety of distance through play. That's what it's group therapy basically that you're just going to weekly.
So let's try to
questions.
There's a few of these where I think the answer is going to be naturally short, so I don't think it's going to be too bad. But
Lightning round it.
from Chrissy, who is Callie 09. I don't have it up. So
Callie numbers in chat.
Callie numbers in chat. Sorry, Chrissy. Chrissy asks, what is your favorite class/race to play when you do? And for us, forever GMs, I'm sure this will be an interesting question.
So I've only ever played once, but I've GM'd for 3 years. So I played a Dragonborn Barbarian, was my first character I ever made. And he has a very special place in my heart. But in the campaign that just ended, I'm going to be playing, and I'm very excited to be playing a cleric. I love support classes. I also have had a merfolk, merfolk or sea elf blade dancer. Is that the wizard subclass? I don't remember.
Blade
Singer. Sword Coast Adventures guide that I've wanted to play for a really long time, like a bioluminescent sea elf that like comes from the deep sea. Very you can just smell the science and everything.
Very cool. Cool.
That's what I'm looking forward to.
Awesome. Luka?
Oh, me? Oh. I don't know that I have a specific. I always tend to go wood elf. Usually with my characters, I like that like connection to nature, that little bit of wildness, that little, I don't know, secretly I just want to be either Geralt or Strider. So it's just like I want to be out and like, getting my little herbs, taking potions and like, but so I usually go with that race. But class, man, before I ever played Dungeons and Dragons like pen and paper or virtually, I played Dungeons and Dragons online, the MMORPG, and I was always a cleric. I loved being able to like heal and just like, yes, you are all working because of me, like just that kind of vibe. But like playing in D&D, I don't know. I think something a little stabby has been a lot of fun. I really liked playing the NPC Ilya, like being able to like just sneak up and go is kind of fun for me. So maybe rogue.
Okay. So for those of you who have seen the content that I am in on TPK, you will know that I like to play weird characters. So outlandish races, Minotaur, Ogre, there's another one that I'm not allowed to talk about because no one knows what he actually is. You can thank Turk for that. I try to stay away from playing humans because that's kind of what I've always done, although I will say there is a special something about being able to play human and give that human something more, like Zeke, you talk about how you create a monster and you want to say, what is something really cool about this monster. Being able to have just a vanilla human, variant human, because and give that character something unique about them. Like I feel like you should give all of your characters something unique about them, but I feel like it stands out so much more as a human. So races, the race for my favorite character has to be something where there's something off or something exotic or unique. Class wise, my favorite class of all time is Wizard. And for those of you who watched the most recent Harper's episode, where we did a bunch of puzzles, that is the reason why I like playing Wizards. Because it is easiest for me to play a high intelligence something, as opposed to me playing Charlie, the ogre ranger, which was a 5 intelligence character that I played on Monday.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was a lot.
He's the sweetest boy.
He was the sweetest boy.
We love a himbo.
Yeah.
I love the himbo, so
We all do.
Yeah, no, it's easier for me to be the person that figures out the hour-long puzzle in 10 minutes, and then have my non-high intelligence character take psychic damage.
Psychic damage, yeah.
Right. And it can also be hard to be like, do I want to lean into the role play here and like be true to the character, or do I want to contribute because I'm a player and I like contributing? So that's hard to balance. So totally get that.
Yeah.
So Chrissy also asked, what is our favorite all-time favorite BBEG? And she didn't give a system, so any BBEG you can think of, favorite all time.
All right, I'll go first. So, like, I know everyone wants me to say Strahd, and I do love his tragedy. I love all of that surrounding Strahd, and also he's just evil, but like in that lawful way, like where it's terrifying. But honestly, if we're not doing system or anything, my favorite BBEG is Glory from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Oh, so good.
Yes.
Oh.
I'm so glad you know this reference. Yeah, no, she is both like utterly terrifying, but then also like you kind of you understand who she is. Like, I don't know how to explain it. So like but yeah, no, she's horrifying. But she is my favorite BBEG ever.
I think I'm having a hard time with anyone coming to mind right now, but I think the BBEGs that most like get me, that I really like, are ones that are relatable, probably somewhat nuanced. I typically like a BBEG that has a sense of humor, and isn't just like very like Gloria is a great example of a BBEG I love, because it's not necessarily, well, she does have a sense of humor, but also like there is a humor about her character that is really easy to enjoy while simultaneously being like, she is horrifying and could rip my head off.
Yes.
And also villains that have like a very clear and concrete goal, especially if that goal isn't necessarily evil in itself. I don't know. In my playtest, I really enjoyed playing Radicor from Pretty Little Liches, because I was very specific about him having like this very weird offbeat sense of humor, having these like these door knockers that want to hear a joke, naming the heads of an undead Hydra after the Archdukes of Hell is like really fun. So I think I tried to channel all those things into Radicor, but I love BBGs like that. Glory's a great example. I love the mayor from Buffy too, and now I'm just stuck on
the
Buffy.
mayor.
So
yeah, no. Well, honestly, Buffy has some of the best BBEGs ever. Every season, like, they're just fantastic.
I also love Eve from Supernatural. Not a great season, but I love Eve.
Yeah,
Eve's good. Eve is very good. I think mine is going to have to be a throwback to my original BBG, which is Darth Vader. It's just such a powerful character to me, and just Star Wars in general is how I got into fantasy and sci-fi and everything in the first place. So and when I say Darth Vader, it's not the movie portrayal of Darth Vader, it's the extended universe canon portrayal of Darth Vader, where he's actually a badass and not, but like the Rogue One portrayal of Darth Vader, where he's tearing through people. So yeah, that would be my answer. Let's see here. Where's my question list? There it is. Cole Robbie asks, what is a setting/theme you have not written, that you have not written for, but that you would really like to someday?
Hmm.
And a related question that Proper asked is like, what's something you've always wanted to do but haven't had enough inspiration for to create, or feel like it's maybe too far out of your wheelhouse?
Both really good questions. I think Ravnica is a really cool setting, which was released for D&D. I love a lot of the Magic the Gathering settings. I sort of, after the Ravnica book was released, I sort of did a deep dive on some of the plane shift articles that Magic the Gathering put out, which were like just sort of short mini articles like, if you want to run a D&D campaign in one of these Magic worlds, here's some succinct information on it and how you could do that. It normally has a few monsters and races to sort of flesh it out. And I think Ravnica would be really fun. I also think, which is basically this very guild-driven world, very faction-heavy, which I love factions. And so I think that would be a setting I would love to write for at some point, or write an adventure in. And I guess a theme or something that I would want to write in but have considered outside my wheelhouse. I don't know. I sort of am all over the place in terms of theme. Some of my adventures are like very pulpy action. Some of them, there's one that's a murder mystery. There's one that's like sort of a love story between two beholders. There's I've written some very bizarre adventures.
Can you send me the name
Let
of
me
that
just
Beholder
write
one?
these down.
Yeah.
Hold on.
It's called Whims of the Heart, a Beholder love story. It has a really fun like little minecart skill challenge where the players have to navigate like a minecart hurtling down these rat trails and getting to choose different paths and stuff. It's very fun. And delving into this to retrieve the heart of this beholder's lover who he dreamed into existence, because that's how beholders are born. Very, very silly, fun,
Perfect.
romantic adventure. So yeah, I don't know. I guess what I'm looking forward to is I'm hoping to write more gothic horror, I guess would be a good short answer.
Okay.
I touch on it a little bit in the Three Faces of Night, but in the 1 to 20 campaign that I've sort of been outlining and slowly preparing myself to do something with, I have been building a lot of gothic horror themes into that campaign, and I'm really that's been really inspiring to me lately. So
I'm just, God, a Beholder love story. That is the
Someone in
coolest thing.
Purple Phil in chat said beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And it was just, that's very good pun. I like that pun.
Very
I'm a
good.
fan of that pun.
It was very fun to come up with like romance-inspired beholder rays. So there's one that's like the jealousy ray. There's like the heartbreak ray. Very fun.
I like this a whole lot.
Chrissy asks again, what do you consider the best way to get out of writer's block?
Writer's block can be killer. I suffered it really recently on an adventure I was writing for a collaboration where I had this great idea. I was really inspired for it, about like academic espionage and murder and like hidden connections. And then I sat down to write it and I just completely fell apart. And I just couldn't come up with like ways to bridge the gap. And I think sometimes when writer's block happens, the best way to deal with it is to recognize that you can't, oftentimes, I guess some people can and sometimes we do, like just brute force your way through it. Sometimes the best way is to just like put it down and consume content that you want to that you think will inspire you instead. So watching that new fantasy show that you've been like putting off for a little bit, or reading that book that's been on your shelf, rereading a favorite story. For me, going through my inspiration journal, all those sorts of things can sort of jog loose little bits in your brain that hopefully you can coalesce into something that you're happy with and proud of.
Yeah, one of the things that helps me a lot is, if you try to brute force writing, more often than not, it's not going to turn out the way you want it.
Yeah.
So what I do is I do as much as I can, and then when I hit a wall, I'll get up, walk around, do something else, and more. You know how they say, all of your best ideas come when you're in the shower, kind of thing. I kind of take that as some of your best ideas come when you're not thinking of the ideas, right?
Absolutely.
So giving yourself some distance, that space helps you kind of subconsciously run the idea through your head, and when you come back to it, or even while you're doing something else, you may have that click. Like Luca, and we're going to talk about a lot of the ideas you had for the Harper's campaign on our Harper's specific total party recap. But I know, Luca, your idea when it came to the children's book for Estelle.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
You were what were you doing when that came to your mind?
I think I was doing laundry. I
Yeah.
was just, but like, I was thinking about the session, and like I had an idea for like most things, like Beldani really wanted her wish spell to go off, and it's like, well, okay, like I want to get that set for her. I want a book for everyone to send on their way. I used one of your authors, Zeke Gonzalez.
That's
I
my name.
basically,
It's an anagram.
my God.
But
So-
that name appears in almost everything I do. But anyway, sorry.
So
go
I
ahead.
made that the pen name for Helibanya, my benevolent lich lady.
Aww.
So at the very end, so after our finale, where they go through the attack of the 50-foot. This is too perfect. Hold on, I've gotta. Okay, so after the end, I did like a little post credits scene, session this last week, where she invited them all to the tower now that they've defeated the Cult of Malar and everything. And they go through a few puzzles because, of course, she can't just not mess with them. Nothing's for free. But they get to the end, and she had a bunch of presents for them, like little Wizard of Oz kind of, and here's your heart, and it was a book written like, she had them passed out by one of her minions. It's a lot of details, but it was written by AZZ Gonzalez, and it was just all these books. But for the one for Proper Nerdy's Estelle, who's basically a warforged Mary Poppins, it was a book of like it was like a photo book, that looked a lot like a fairy tales, an old fairy tales book, but they opened it up and it was like all the faces of the children that they'd nannied and stuff. And then as they continued turning the pages, it was all the faces of all the children in Waterdeep that they had saved by defeating the Cult of Malar. And then if they kept going, it was all the faces of the children all throughout Forgotten Realms that they had saved by defeating the Cult of Malar. And because like Estelle didn't really have like some big thing that they were working towards after the end of all this, so I didn't have like a book like, here's how to do your wish spell, here's how to go off and find your missing parents, so I wanted something that was very specific to them and what they do, and like raising children was like what they did. So I wanted that and I was just sitting there doing laundry, like thinking about the books and like, okay, I need to put together the handouts for this. And then I was like, but what oh wait, and I was like, hurry and write this down. I was just doing laundry when that came to me.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Encounters for They Came from the Deep, almost all of them came to me. I'm a swimmer. I swim long distance, and before COVID, when I could actually get into a pool, but
Right.
Almost every single one of the encounters from that came from like intrusive thoughts I had while swimming I call it an ironfish, but it's like a 3.2 mile or whatever. Literally just swimming tons of laps. And I was like, what if there was an anglerfish in this water? I mean, obviously it wouldn't survive, but like, what if there was, and what if it was magical? I'm going to try to remember that.
just all of your thalassophobia, like just surfacing, like, okay, let's write this down and keep this for ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Purple Phil in chat asks, have you ever run a game or thought of running a game with a co-GM?
I never have. I think it could be really fun if I do it with somebody who I really vibe with and have good energy with. I could see it being like a really cool, unique experience. I also tend to be like a little bit of a control freak, so it would have to be like somebody who I really get along well with. But I think that would be really fun to try.
Yeah, and I know there are certain things where, I mean, the ideas come into my head because of a few things. Like, for instance, there's a campaign setting called West Marches, which is, you have a kind of lead DM, and then you have like session specific DM. No, I'm not saying that's right. You have a lead DM, and then you have like group specific DMs, and all of the DMs coordinate this large, could be 40 plus player campaign. And it's, that's a lot. Don't get me wrong. That is probably a little too much to handle at times. But the idea is very, very interesting to me, and also reading through the Dungeon Master's Guide. At some point in there, it talks about alternative DM styles, and one of the things that is actually in the content that Wizards of the Coast put out there is this idea of fate points, that you can have like your players like use a fate point to change the DM during a session, which I've never seen happen before. I don't know how popular that is, but it's always been something that's really interesting to me. And I feel like you have to have a very, very specifically vibing group to do that. And everyone needs to be so invested in the story or, something like that. So it's always been an interest to me. I just don't know how feasible it is to pull off without really, at least not in D&D, right? Not in D&D 5e. Now, there's another TTRPG called Fiasco.
Yeah.
Fiasco, where there is no GM, and everyone has equal weight in how the game goes about. And so that kind of, like, for instance, if you're interested in seeing how that works, over on Nat 20, which is a channel that we work with all the time, we have a co-campaign that we run on both channels called Roundhouse. Nat 20, I was in 3 episodes of what they call Smash Cut, which is a Fiasco-based system. Luka was in the first one. Sarah X Franco was in the second one, and then I think was that the only one? No, Sarah came back. No. Was I the only one in the third one, Luka? I can't remember.
Remember, I only did the
It
one.
was collaborative.
So. It was collaborative,
right.
Yes. But it was really cool because literally anything you said went. And so it was very much a if you've ever seen an improv show where you go and you like the audience yells at suggestions, that's what it felt like the entire time. And so I feel like that is kind of like what co-GMing might be like. It cannot be as rigid as some GMs would want.
Right.
And so that's kind of where my hesitation comes into play there.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's like those round robin things in writing class where they, you have to write a paragraph and then you pass it to the right, and everyone, and it's like, it starts off, it was a dark and stormy night, and then it's like, but then I walked outside and it was sunshine and flowers, like kind of, everyone takes it in a different direction. But go ahead.
I was just gonna say that as a little bit of a control freak, I think my first couple of sessions were relatively like the party was on rails. It was the first time I was really GMing. I wanted everything to stay on a track that I was comfortable with, which I was very open with my players about being like, please just like follow the plot hooks for now. Like the world will definitely open up in the future when I'm more comfortable. But for right now, I am still learning what to do. This is our first game together. I would really appreciate it if we just sort of stayed quote unquote on track. And I'll try to be as flexible as I can in that track, but I'm nervous about this basically. Mm-hmm. But as I've become more experienced, I've really leaned a lot more into collaborative storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the reasons that I'm so attracted to games like Monster of the Week and Trophy Dark is because they go farther on that collaborative storytelling scale. With any Powered by the Apocalypse game, there's a lot more player involvement in how the unfolding of the story goes. There's decisions that players make in the mechanics that can really drive the story. And in Trophy Dark, and any game that includes the Devil's Bargain concept, you really get a lot of fantastic player input that can create a really collaborative story. At the end of my 1 to 20 3-year campaign that just ended, something that I encouraged all my players to do is they knew that something was going to happen where they would, if they won the final fight, get an opportunity to change the world in a way that they wanted. And so that was sort of me totally giving the quill, so to speak, over to my players and saying, like, I love this world, I've built it with you, how do you want to change it? And that was really rewarding for me to see what my players chose to do when they got that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So we are running a bit over, so one last question. Let's see. That one. Actually, we only have one question left, so great. Proper Nerdy asks, what's a one-shot or campaign that blew your mind, and did it ever change how you've approached writing?
Wow, that's a great question. Oh, that blew my mind. Oh God, that's tough. Luka, do you have an answer?
I mean, running your stuff was like really a huge thing for me. All of the NPCs and just how it built out. Like, my campaign would not have been the same without it, and it was like having those NPCs and those stories and those liches with this that were actually fleshed out as characters, like, inspired me to flesh out more of my world and, like, okay, let's build a whole thing about what's going on here. So it definitely changed how I ended that campaign, for sure.
Wow. Okay, now I'm gonna cry.
Sorry.
Thank you. Oh, okay. I think a big one was Curse of Strahd for me. Reading Curse of Strahd and seeing that really sandbox style campaign, I think really changed the way I thought about what a campaign could be, which was definitely huge in terms of, I think it was after Curse of Strahd where I was like really inspired to be like, my adventures can end different ways. And that's when I really started to do a conclusion section talking about different facets of the adventure that could go differently based on what the players decide. So maybe that would be that's probably my answer there, I think.
Good. For me, gosh, I think, the campaign that really got me hooked on D&D in the first place and definitely influenced my writing in some way was Critical Role's, all of Critical Role's content. Matthew Mercer is a brilliant storyteller. The thing that's influencing me the most right now is actually the Adventure Zone Amnesty, which, for one, introduced me largely for the first time to other TTRPG systems, which is incredible. I love Monster of the Week because of Amnesty, and it is, if you have not seen the Adventure Zone Amnesty,
I'm not caught up to Amnesty yet.
Oh man, I'm not going to say anything, but it is just the good stuff.
It's very fun.
It is very fun. But it also it influenced me to start thinking about things outside of my own wheelhouse. I've only ever really, before that, I had only ever really played D&D 5e, and now I'm in a Monster of the Week campaign. I've played Fiasco system here and other system here, and now I'm planning a Call of Cthulhu campaign for myself. So lots of stuff going on, a lot of changes in general with writing, just because of that one catalyst that set it off. So thank you all for the questions. Thank you so much, Zeke, for joining us today. It was a delight to have you.
Thank you.
as always, we will be having, for right now at least, Murder and Coffee will be every month on the second Saturday of the month. So the next Murder and Coffee will be December 12th. December 12th. And I need to confirm, so don't hold me to this, but I believe we will be discussing therapy and TTRPGs with our very own Chrissy Kelly numbers in chat. So I need to get back with her on that. I know I talked to her about it way long ago, but I haven't been good in following up. So thank you all for joining. I hope you all learned something, had fun, drank some coffee, and didn't pass out in the middle of this early morning session that we just had.
Plus, we're all like cute and stuff, so that's
yeah.
amazing.
I mean, come on, look, I broke out like a nice flannel for this. Come on, guys.
I am in my pajamas because it's morning time, so
Yes,
we're fine.
But thank you again. Keep on the lookout for more incredible TPK content. Zeke, would you like to talk about anything that's coming up, anything that you're working on that people should keep an eye out for?
Absolutely. So I have a lot of things in the pipeline, but I'm going to keep it to just a couple of the most immediate ones. So coming out, I think actually this upcoming week is the final volume of the Odyssey anthology from Core Artificer and Sticky Hunter. And it is an anthology of island adventures set in the set in Theros, which is sort of the Greek-inspired D&D setting that came out for 5e this year. And I have island adventures in all 3 of the volumes. So this is the final volume. It brings in a lot of that tier 4 content that I have sort of started to become known for. So if you like Titans and Fallen Archons and complex villains, this is definitely, my island in there is definitely going to be for you. And there's so much cool content in that anthology that I'm just so excited for it to hit the guild. I've also been working on something a little bit different, a supplement that right now is tentatively called the DM's Guide to Travel, which is, it has 10 different ways that DMs can prep for travel sessions that range from completely narrative to crunchy mechanical ways that sort of incorporate rules from the DMG and some homebrew rules together to make it a little bit more easy flowing and usable. I know there are lots of different ways people like to run travel, and sometimes I know I struggled with it a lot when I was first trying to figure out, like, okay, this is like a 3-day journey. Do I really need to do that in game? What does that look like? And so hopefully that will help some DMs find new fun ways or mash up different ways to prep for travel. And then I also have, probably coming out before the end of the year, another small bestiary with 10 Fae creatures. It's going to be called Fickled Fae, that are each of the Fae are inspired by different insects and bugs. And so they're weird, skittering, unsettling Fae creatures because we don't have enough Fae in 5e yet.
Agreed.
And then I'm also doing a tier 1 adventure, which will climax in a boss fight against a kaiju for level 1 characters. Except instead of running it as an actual stat block, you go against this kaiju as if it is a complex trap. So that will be, or skill challenge. So that will be something really different and funky that I'm trying out to see how that feels in play. And I'm very excited. It seems like it could be a really fun little bit of very cinematic storytelling.
That's awesome. And Luka, do you want to talk about things that are coming up for you?
Okay. Well, I just finished up Harper's season 1, so starting in January is Harper's season 2, where we start new characters back at level 1, and we're gonna make it all the way through to level 20 again. So hopefully we'll be seeing some more content from Zeke, especially if that kaiju thing is out by then. And then I don't know, I may or may not have a Curse of Strahd campaign starting around the same time. But you didn't hear it from me.
You didn't hear it from me either. My lips are sealed. I cannot talk about it.
Listen, no, I am excited to potentially start that just because it is one of my favorite campaigns. It's a classic. It's a lot of fun to run. But other than that, I'm just hanging out here. We're doing a few midwinter one shots in December, and then other than that, we're waiting around for Harper season 2 to start.
Awesome. And I am the ever busy bee. You can catch me every Sunday at 7 p.m. Central for Total Party Recap, where I'm joined by Sir Heckalot and Turk with an Accent, and starting, well, a special guest as well every week. This week we will be recapping this past week, including this episode, with J.K. Madigan. So come check that out. Total Party Recap is very fun, and the only rule is that you must have fun. That is the only rule.
It's a rowdy show. Fun and rowdy.
It is a little rowdy. I'm not going to lie. Coming up for me too, Luka's content. I'm going to be a player in a bunch of one-shots, which I'm trying to cut back on the amount of one-shots because of all the other stuff I'm in, but it's proving to be difficult.
Play all the things.
Yes, play all the things. And let's see. Roundhouse. God, there is a lot of content that is coming out on TPK. So you can find the schedule at TPK.
Chat.
Yeah, it's linked in chat. For those of you who don't see chat, maybe watching on YouTube or something, it's tpkroleplay.com/schedule. So check it out. All of our content is on our calendar, and you will see we have very few days where we don't have content, and it's all incredible. So go check that out, and we will see you again on this show early December.
Thank you so much for coming on, Zeke. It was
Yeah,
awesome
so
and a little
fun.
fangirly to talk to the person that wrote the content that I ran for my campaign. So this is awesome.
No. I'm just a silly little gay boy. It's fine.
I'm here for it. I love it. But yeah, is there anything else, Tyrant, before we head out, or should I take us out?
I don't think so. Once again, if you're a coffee company and you like TTRPGs, please, for the love of God, send me coffee.
We need your coffee.
Yeah.
Chat, thank you for all of your questions and for hanging out with us on this sleepy Saturday morning.
Yeah. We love you all.
All right. Good.